GameStop. Jesus. What is happening? Like, what is going on? This is a literal historic event. I hope you guys know this. This is going to go down in history. And if there's a Netflix doc, man, don't be surprised. This is insanity. Now, I don't think what's going on with the actual stock going up to like 400 is historic. What I think is historic is the criminal activity going on like right in front of our eyes. A bunch of, if you've seen Dave Portnoy videos, he pretty much explains it pretty well. But for those of you who are curious to know like what is actually happening with GameStop right now, it's simply what we call a short squeeze. So if you don't know what shorting is, essentially, say a stock's at $10, right? Going long regularly, so the person who wants to buy the stock, if they buy it at $10 and then it drops down to 5, we have the obligation to sell or hold it for as long as we want or as short as we want, right? If we want to sell it at the 5, we have the choice. Or if we want to hold it at 5, that's our choice. Now, the difference between going long and shorting is you're selling something that's not yours. You're basically borrowing from your broker, right? So say you wanted to short the stock at $10 because you think it's going to go lower, so then you could buy it back at a lower price and then you keep the difference of that change, right? So say you shorted the stock at 10 and it went down to 5, you gained that $5 difference. If you see what I'm trying to say, that's the most basic way to explain shorting. But here's the thing with shorting, right? Like if you shorted at $10 and it went up to, let's say, 15, you now do not have the obligation to hold it or not. It is up to your broker. Your broker can jump in and say, hey, this is our money. We are now going to close your position. So that is the difference between shorting and going long. So keep in mind that if you're shorting something and it goes against you, meaning if you think it's going to go lower and it actually goes higher, your broker has the obligation to sell your position and close it, which means you would have to pay back the difference and buy it at a higher price, which means you would then owe money, right? That's basically the most basic way to explain what is happening with GameStop here. So now when you're shorting and then there's also people buying, it creates a chain reaction, basically a short squeeze of the shorts are always covering their position at a higher price. And there's also people buying the stock up as well. So it creates a massive increase in stock price. So this isn't crazy at all because this has happened before. I'm sure there's many stocks it's happened to before. A good example right now is TLRY. This happened with one of the weed stocks back in 2018. But if you look here, this stock went from $35 all the way up to 300. The top tick was 300. And then if you look, this is what happened, right? It looks very similar to GameStop, right? This is a phenomenon that happens once every so often. It's essentially the shorts versus the longs. So bulls versus bears, right? Now, what is so crazy about what's happening right now is that these hedge funds are now, or not the hedge funds, some brokers are not allowing you to buy a stock, which means you're only allowed to sell it. And it's odd because this has never really happened before. So it's this huge nonsense going on. Basically, they're basically changing the rules of the game. It's crooked, to be honest. So that's why this is a massive historic event. I don't think it's so crazy that this stock, GameStop, is having a short squeeze right now. It's happened before many times. Now, to be honest, what usually happens after a short squeeze is, like as you've seen in Tilray, the price ended up going way back down. I personally think that would have happened with GameStop as well. GameStop stock as well. That's like a tongue twister, eh? This would have happened eventually. The stock, whether it went up all the way up to 1,000, it was eventually going to come back down to a small price. What's crooked is the manipulation behind like these big brokerage companies and firms and hedge funds who are essentially getting bailed out of their position, right? Like the whole point of the market is that like you have the decision on what to buy, what price to buy a stock and what price to sell a stock. It's all up to you and you have the decision. Now, when they kind of take away the decision, it's messed up. It's like Dave Portnoy says, right? It's like changing the rules of a football game. It's not fair. So that's why I think this is such a historic event. And like to be honest, if these people who have changed the rules of certain brokerages to not allow you to buy stocks like Robinhood and interactive brokers, for example, right? Those are just two to name a few. I believe there's been more. But there's got to be a consequence for this stuff to happen, right? Like, or else it's just evident that the government or whoever is actually in control of this, I don't know who's in control, right? Like, I'm not going to act like I know exactly what's going on behind the curtain. Like, I don't. Which is why this is so interesting. But man, is this not some crazy price action? Like, in my opinion, this is proof that like you got to know risk in the market, right? You got to understand like when stocks are completely irrational and when to be buying. Like in my opinion, buying at these levels, like up at 370 and 445, thinking like this stock's going to go higher, is a very, in my opinion, it could work out, right? Like who knows? Like anything could happen in these markets. Like it literally could end up going to 1,000. But is it like worth it though? Out of all the other possible opportunities you could find in the market, right? So that's why I kind of like I try to emphasize like manage your risk and actually think about like your money to the point where it's like, do you want to put your money at the very top of this thing? Like it came down over 70% in one day. Like if you were the person who bought at the very top and you got scared and you sold at the bottom, you lost 76%, which is crazy. Now, typically with short squeezes, they end up falling back down, like just because at some point in time, eventually, the people who actually made profits in the stock are going to want to take their gains and sell, right? Like it's just a natural phenomenon that I think happens in the market. But man, this is just insane with the madness. So if I hope that kind of explains a little bit what is actually going on. If you were confused in the first place, I hope that explanation makes it a little bit simpler, more simple to understand. So, cheers, guys. Be safe in the markets, man. This is it's crazy. It's crazy. So just be careful out there.